Welcome to this screencast of how to complete one of the gamer badges activity that's called the Python quiz. It's a bit tricky, so I've decided to make this screencast to hopefully help you out. At any time you can pause this screencast and just have a go yourself and then play it from where you were to continue. I'm going to try my best not to give you the answers, but to give you some information you need to get the answers. So the first, when you get into the quiz, it gives you this piece of code. So just in terms of using this tool that they've put together here called Trinket, if you go to the three lines over there, or the burger I think we tend to call it, if you click on that, first of all you can go full screen with the code, and you can actually look at the code, you can edit the code. If you still find that difficult to see, you can actually increase the font size of the code. You can widen the code window so you can see all the code. And you can edit that code, and at any point if you think, oh, I think I've made a bit of a mess of it, and I need to go back to the original code, then you go back to the burger and you do reset, and it'll just ask if you're sure you want to get rid of those changes. If you want to run the code, you can run the code and the output comes out over here, and then it starts asking you questions and so on. And you're basically seeing what this code on the left is running, how it looks when it runs on the right. Failing all that though, you can actually just download the code. If you download it, it comes down in what's called a zip file, which is kind of like a kind of compressed format. If you then click on that and then click on the file it comes up with and do a save or a copy, and then put it into some folder somewhere where you keep your Python code. I tend to keep mine in here. Okay, you can then open that file in your normal IDLE that you've been using at school, because the big difference between these exercises is you're used to using Python 3.7 or 3.6 as I've got in this case, and that code is all written in Python 2.7. The big change is, to get this code running, you've got to go through systematically, and every print statement you're going to make sure you put the brackets around it. Now if you don't, if you forget, you'll get an error message, and if I show you what it's like, it talks about parentheses. Okay, it says missing parentheses, so that's kind of like, these brackets are a type of parentheses, so you've got to go through the whole code putting those in. So you can play with snippets of code, you can take them out of the tool, but obviously don't spend forever, because I think eventually it probably times you out. So you're back into the tool at this point, and it's basically at this point saying have a little play with this code and see what it does. Okay, so when you've seen what it does, you can go out of full screen mode and go back to this, and then you can say, right, okay, have you had a go at the quiz? Yeah, I'm ready to create my own now. And then it's asking you some questions. I'm not sure why it scrolls down to the bottom, and it strikes me you get very little screen space on this tool, because you've got this banner here that I can't seem to figure out how to get rid of. So I quite often put things into full screen mode with F11, function 11 on the keyboard. So if you go to F11, you at least get rid of the kind of the controls at the top of the browser, the Google Chrome browser. To come out of this mode, by the way, it's F11 once again. So we're going to look at the print command. Okay, and this is the print command in 2.7. Okay, so it says you can modify the code if you like. Try changing the text or adding extra print commands. So you can go into the code and have a little go with the 2.7 print command, but remember, you don't put the brackets in 2.7. And then what they tend to do is they give you some code to play around with, and then they say, right, let's see what you've learned from that. And it says here, you've learned a few things. It says the code below is wrong. Use the code editor above to fix it with your knowledge of Python. Okay, so this is an editor. This is a fixed piece of code down the bottom here, and you've got to edit it in the line above. So there's a problem with that, and I hope most of us can see fairly obviously what the difference is and what the problem is in that case. This one's a bit more tricky because it's got the apostrophe inside the text, and they're actually sort of separating the print text with a single quote, and there are two ways to solve that, but there are clues in the code because we haven't really covered it in class, but there's an example there of where they want to print an apostrophe and they put what's called an escape character before it, which is this backslash. So that's one way of solving it, where you're saying to Python, don't interpret this next character as a special Python character like the ones that show you at the end of the quiz. Then you click on check my answer. So I'm not going to actually do those questions, but I will just pause the video now, and then I'll... So the next part of the quiz starts talking about variables, and it's explaining that in Python you don't have to do what you do in other languages where you have to declare them and give them a type. In Python you can just start assigning values to them, which gives them a type. Python also does something called dynamic typing, where if you set score to 10 there, it knows it's an int, but if you set it to a string somewhere else, it would then say, okay, it's a string now. It gives you two ways of doing floating point, or real numbers as we call them in math, or decimal numbers, sorry. And then it talks about the operators for arithmetic in Python, because that's the multiplication sign in Python, that's the division sign in Python. And it gives you a little code snippet here that works out your age. Obviously we'd have to set this current year to 2019 now, and if you were gonna, your year of birth, if it was 2006, 7, 8, that should be able to work out how old you are. But we've got another piece of code here, and we've looked at how to make it full screen, so I'll just go into full screen with the code, just make the font bigger so we can actually see it easily. The bit in this code that's a bit well, there's quite a few things in this code that are kind of new to us. Not quite sure where that 650 came from. That might be something I did earlier. If you ever get rogue bits in your code, just press the reset to go back to what the code should be. Okay, so they've used the function here, and they're returning a value here. They're returning answer if answer is correct, which is going to be true or false. So in the actual name of the function, you're going to get a value back that's true or false. So it says here if check answer, so that is going to yield a value of true or false based on that test down there at the end of the function. Okay. The other bit to draw your attention to is something we've not really done, where we're printing down here, and we're printing this thing here, which is converting this expression in the brackets to a string, and it's saying round this number called times bigger to 2 decimal places. That's what round is actually doing with that floating point number. Okay, but you can run the code and see what it does and look at the output. Okay, but then down here what it's asking you to do is it's saying that's the output you get on the screen, 121.67, and it's a floating point number and it's been rounded to 2 decimal places. And to round it to 0 decimal places, then you go into the code, edit the part I've just shown you down here at the bottom, and change it to 2. In fact, I can't see it now because it's not full screen. This line here, okay, so that line, change that to a 0, check that out, see what effect that has, and then it says okay, that's rounding it now to 0 decimal places, so you're going to get a number that's like 0.0 as the output. I mean, do try it each time you change it, but now they're saying change that rounding function to the int function. Now the int function doesn't need any arguments, so in here you need to get rid of this bit here. You need to get rid of the comma 2. Whoops. You need to get rid of the comma 2 because the int function doesn't need that. Okay, so you just change round for int, put the number in brackets. You don't need the comma 2. I think I've just messed up my code, but never mind. And then we're doing some maths here, and basically they're saying there's a piece of code, result is equal to, and it's based on those operators they showed you right up here, these ones, addition, subtraction and division. So down here you've got to decide which one goes in that space. So 3 something 5, when you print the result of that statement, that the assignment that goes into the value that's assigned to result, what do you see on the screen? Well, you see 15, so what must the operator be? So you've got to put in the missing operator. Same here, this time you see an answer of 3 on the screen when you print the value that's been assigned to result. So what's the missing operator? And then finally, you check your answers. So we're moving on slightly more depth to our understanding of variables, and we're looking at text strings now instead of just numbers. We have covered these in class. You can assign a value to a variable that then contains a text string, and this on the right is called a literal, a text literal, because it's just everything that's between the quotes, whether they're single or double, gets assigned to the variable. Okay, and then it gives you an example of using this special operator, which when it's between two variables or two strings has the role of concatenating or joining them together instead of the arithmetical property of adding them together. This looks at, then there's a piece of code down here that shows you a snippet of one of the questions from the quiz about Jupiter, okay? And then they're saying here, okay, that final line there, we've kind of hard coded Jupiter into that final line. We've just put it into the string literal there inside the quotes. And they're basically saying, can you now change it below by editing this line of code here, so that instead of being hard coded, you're using the value from perhaps a variable. Okay, for some reason I can't seem to scroll across. There we go. So you'll notice that there's a variable. It's got the correct answer. It's been assigned to Jupiter. So that might give you a big clue on that one. And then there's some exercises here where they're really testing your understanding. They're saying, do you understand that if you create a variable animal is the identifier of a variable. It's the name of a variable. What goes on this side, if you want to assign it a value, has got to be a string literal. It could be the name of another variable, but if somebody's saying assign it to a specific value, that needs to be expressed as a string literal. And there are big clues about how you do string literals at the top of this section. Okay, and then there's a bit down here, it says, change the code below in order to print out that Mount Everest is 8848 meters high. So there's a variable there that's been assigned that value, and you've got to put it into the code. But Python, at this point, after it's completed that line there, will think that the type of this variable called height is integer. For this to work as a concatenation character, that type must be changed from an integer. Wouldn't want to give too many clues, but there are clues up at the top here in the rest of this page that you might want to go back and have a look at. So on this part of the quiz, we're looking at really getting input from the keyboard. So they give you an example here where you assign a value to a variable, what's your name, you type in a name, and then it prints out what you typed into the screen. Okay, gives you a piece of code here though that says what's your favourite pet is assigned to this variable as a string literal, and then it says, right, the input function print out to the screen as a prompt to the user that question. So it says, what is your favourite pet? Whatever you type in is then assigned to pet, and then it says reply back is equal to, so it's building a string here. It says, oh, so you like, and then it concatenates whatever you put as the pet, and then says that's cool, okay? And then it prints that out. So what they're saying down here is change that code around, so go in there and edit it, so that it basically asks you what your name is now. So it doesn't say what's your pet, it says what's your name, and then you change the variable so it no longer says pet, because we're not after pet, we're after name, yeah? And then change the reply back so that it says, oh well, hello, and then the name that you typed in, are you ready, I hope you're ready for the quiz, and then again run it to see it works. And then finally they're saying, even though we've done this thing here where we've set a variable to be that literal string and then put it in there. You could just take that string and pop it straight into the bracket, so there's no need for the variable called question. Then they're saying if you understand all that, you will be able to choose which one of these is the correct way of doing it in terms of getting somebody's name from a keyboard into a variable and then printing it out. Okay, in this test we're looking at conditionals, and it's asking you to look at conditionals that use these operators here: equals, greater than, less than, and so on. And it gives you a code snippet. It says this checks if an answer is correct. Okay, so with the if statement we're saying here, if 4 is greater than 3, then print 4 is greater than 3. If you print this statement, that statement yields the value true, that 5 is actually equal to 5, so you get the value true. So when you print it, you get a true on the screen. If you print this statement, 4 is less than 2, and it's false, it's not true. 4 is not less than 2, so you get a false printed to the screen. So statements like this always yield a value that's either true or false. Okay. And if we want to do multiple checks, then we use this thing called the elif, which is actually short for else if. And Python does these in order, so it checks if score is equal to 200. If it is, it will do that one. It won't then check these. None of these will be tested. It always just goes with the first one that's true. But then it checks if score is equal to 150. Then it checks if score is equal to 100. And then there's a kind of catch-all statement here, the else, that says if none of the above are true, then you print this statement here. Okay. And then what they're asking you to do is, they've got a piece of code here that just initializes this variable by assigning a value to it of 0, and the variable is called score, and then it prompts the user with this red text that says how many sides does a hexagon have, and then you take that value from the keyboard, converting it to an int and storing it in answer. And what they're saying here is they want you to add the code to check if the answer is 6, and if so, add 1 to the score. And if it's less than or more than 6, get the program to print it's too low or too high. So the answer for a hexagon is obviously 6 sides. If they say less than 6, you say then it's too low. And if they put an answer that's greater than 6, then you put too high. But they actually give you the code here, and it's either that one, or that one. So if you thought it was this one, you just literally, if you kind of like hold down button 1 on your mouse or your keyboard or your tablet like I've got, you select the code, and then you can do copy by doing button 2, or just doing, as I often do, Control C, which is a keyboard shortcut, and then you go up to the code, window, and you can just paste that answer in. You can just paste that code in. For some reason I didn't copy it then. Let me just see if that is actually working, because I can't believe you're going to have to type the code in. So I've just copied the code. Let's do their copy, and you can then copy paste. Hopefully, yeah, so the paste has been enabled this time. So you've got to just choose what you think is the right one out of 3, and I've not just guided you, it's up to you. Then there's some questions at the bottom, and they're saying, does that expression there yield a value that is a Boolean value, which is either true or false? You've got to decide which one. So you've got to look at the statement and say true or false, and then you type the value on that line, and then you check your answers. Just a quick addition to what I just told you on this one. You paste the code in so you can run it and test it and check your answer, but you actually select an answer by clicking on one of these boxes, and then it makes it dark green. So in this section of the quiz, we're looking at, it says methods, but let's use the word functions. Functions are a kind of procedure that return a value. Procedures don't return a value. you'll learn what a method is when you do more advanced Python. You get into sort of object oriented, and it's to do with classes and objects and instances of classes. But for now, we'll just call them let's call them functions. So what it says is, if you use this word def, you're defining a function called myMethod, and it accepts a parameter that we've called param1. And then this print statement simply says print the string literal myMethod is, and concatenate to that param1 and then the exclamation mark. And this is what it looks like when you run it. If you supply a value for param1, which is awesome, you get this outputted. My method is awesome. And if you run it and you give it the parameter a value of brilliant, then you get this output. Okay. So defining a function doesn't run it, it just makes it available for us to then execute and give it a value if it's got parameters like param1. So down here they give you some code that uses this. It takes it's called check answer, and it takes two values. One is the actual answer that was typed in, and one is the actual correct answer, and it checks if they're the same. It sets this value local variable called results to be false. And then it says if answer is the same as the correct answer, then the result becomes true, and then you return the function name itself. Check answer returns a value in its name, which is then either true or false based on the result of that check inside it. And this is how it's used. So we can use it in an if statement, and that sort of condition there, that predicate, check answer correct there, is going to return a value of just true or false. It's going to say if true or if false, and it all depends upon what the outcome of running the function is. And then there's some information. They give you some challenges here to do with the code above, but basically they're then just saying what's the right way to define a function in Python. Is it that way, that way, that way? And the answer's fairly obvious. So I'll leave that up to you. And then they say here's a function called say, and all it does is prints whatever parameter you send it. So in there you're going to supply as the parameter value a string literal of hello world. You're printing this thing called message. So what's the name of the parameter of the function? Okay, just like in this example up here, you had a function, it had a parameter called param1, that was the identifier of the parameter, if you like, and then you can reference that inside the function just like it was like a variable. Okay. I would add to what I've just said about this example where you've got to pick one of these code snippets here as being the correct way or the right way to define a function in Python, that none of them is a particularly good example because they all take a parameter called param1 and none of them actually use it inside the function, which to be honest would be a very poor piece of code. So pick one that you think is the best out of a pretty motley bad bunch, to be honest. Of course, and then finally, the final bit of that test just checks to see if you learnt anything from the previous activities, like do you understand that the concatenate operator only works on string variable types and no other types, so you have to do some conversion sometimes, etc., etc. I'll leave the final page to you. Good luck.